So welcome back, everyone. We are going to start again with the Readium and Thorium session. A few words about this session. Software development comes with long hours of triage and prioritization lists. Important features have to be postponed because of uncertainty, time consumption, or technology issue. Other less significant features may be no-brainers and quick to do. It's a live process. Choices can change and evolve depending on new information or because a problem turns out more difficult to solve than expected. We usually use Kanbans to materialize and keep track of what is to do next. We play with cards, and that's a relevant allegory because you place cards accordingly to the knowledge you have of the game in your hand and the game in the hands of your partners. Luckily, as we build open source, we don't have to guess the cards in the hand of competitors. So now let's hear about the results of this triage activity as per today with Jiminy, Daniel, and Hadrien, who are part of our talented tech team and who are going to tell you about Readium and Thorium roadmap. Please welcome them.
Hello again. Yes, the idea here is that you just saw a presentation where people explain how they use the different Readium toolkits, how they use LCP. So I'm sure a lot of you are also interested in knowing, what's new, what's next, and that's very much the intent of this session. And actually, on the new side of things, we have quite a bit. So you see, we talk about Readium projects, and we talk about Thorium Suite, which is something new. You haven't seen that at a DPS event before. So let me explain what we mean. So the big question a lot of people ask me these days is, so what's Readium and what's Thorium? What's the difference? And the difference is pretty much straightforward when you look it up like this. Readium is essentially a number of toolkits. So think of it as source code. Think of it as pieces that you need to build an app. You can think of Readium as the engine in the car, for example. And we've been working on Readium for mobile for a number of years. That's what we've seen a lot of people mentioning in the previous session. But we've also been working on Thorium Web, which we'll touch upon today. And so Thorium, instead of being just pieces, are full reading apps. So some of you may already know and use Thorium Reader, that I'm referencing here as Thorium Desktop. And you'll see that Thorium Desktop now has a bunch of friends with mobile and web. So we build the full product using the toolkit, but it takes quite a bit more to build a full product. And so what you're already seeing with this slide is a renewed commitment, not just in building toolkits, but also in building product from EDRLab. So if we talk first about Readium for a bit. So when we think about Readium now, so if you go on GitHub, we have a lot of repos. So we've tried to clean things up to make it as easy as possible to understand. But we have what we think are 4 main toolkits. And the 4 main toolkits are identified by the language that are used, but those languages are very easily tied to a platform. So we have Swift. Swift is used for iOS, iPadOS, but it also works with macOS. So that's still kind of new-ish, but Apple has been trending towards more of a unified user experience, be it from a UI point of view or from a code point of view. So it's also technically possible to use the Swift toolkit on Mac devices. We have Kotlin, which is often used with Android, but it's also very useful for Chrome OS. We haven't seen any mention of Chrome OS until now, but Chrome OS is extremely popular with students in a number of countries. So being able to address this market is quite interesting as well, if you're in the education space. We have TypeScript. So for those of you who don't know TypeScript, think of it as fancy JavaScript, I guess, which is also used for building the website. And finally, we have Go, which has been mentioned by Leonard before. It's useful for building the server side of things, but as we'll see, there are a lot more use cases for the Go toolkit than we've had before, including for content aggregators, distributors, publishers. So these are the main toolkits. Aside from the main toolkits, we also have things that we think of as utility. They're utility because they power important features or they allow important workflows. So one that we've had since many, many years now is Readium CSS. So Readium CSS is all about styling, visual adjustment. It's what makes it possible to do pagination. It's what makes it possible to customize how you see things. Extremely important in an EA context, for example. Speech is really, really brand new, but it's already implemented in Thorium Desktop. And speech is going to be or standalone utility for text-to-speech and read aloud. Not just for reading apps, but potentially for anything. What we envision is, for example, a website, a newspaper website on the web could use it to power a read aloud feature for any article, to give you an example. So that's new. I'm not going to talk about this one because we'll probably talk about it next year. And the last one, it's probably the most confusing one if you're not a developer. But yeah, I'll have a full slide on that one, so don't worry too much. So Readium Mobile. Readium Mobile is by far the most popular toolkit for mobile reading apps. What we see is that we have wide adoption of both Swift and Kotlin. We count 100 plus apps. I'm not counting both platforms. So when I say 100 plus, that would be 200 plus or probably 250 if we counted everything. And what's interesting is that it's used by very different type of companies. You see retailers, you see subscription services, libraries, publishers, and I think we haven't reached really the full potential of that. I think education will also benefit a lot from this in the future. And what we see is that most of the adoption for LCP is driven by Readium Mobile. So it's not too surprising because when you look at studies in different markets, you often see that smartphones are leading the way in terms of how people are reading. In most markets now, it's easy to understand. It's a device that everyone owns. It's a device that everyone has in their pockets. So it is very much the one, it's like the one thing you always have with you. That makes a lot of sense. Plus, we have those huge screens and fancy smartphones these days that makes it even better. And so what is really important for this year is that, well, EDRLab has always been involved in the maintenance. Now, EDRLab is very much taking over most of the work done on Readium Mobile. So that's a huge responsibility. It means we need to scale the team. It means we have to do quite a bit more, but it also puts EDRLab in the driver's seat, which means being able to decide what are the most important pieces, evolution, for the toolkit. So that's quite important. And so being in that driver's seat, for 2025, we took the decision to have a focus on audio and accessibility. And audio is very useful for accessibility, but audio goes beyond accessibility. I think it's very easy to understand why we have such a focus. Once again, EAA, and also huge growth in adoption for audiobooks in many markets. So these are the things we're focused on for this year. Of course, mobile is ever shifting, ever changing. You have to keep up with everything that's going on. I mean, just last week we had WWDC from Apple, where they did a lot of announcements. Google did the same thing. So we're also looking at those things, and our intent is to always use the latest and greatest APIs made available. So I already mentioned accessibility. There are a lot of cool new accessibility features coming in those platforms. We also see a lot of interesting AI APIs, especially on-device AI, which are very interesting because on-device AI, you don't have all the issues that we mentioned with TDM Wrap and all that. So it's also the easiest implementation and the least problematic one we can work with. So a lot of interesting things, and we're definitely also keeping up with those. So if you look at the roadmap for a bit, so we've added quite a few things, Q1, Q2. We've added LCP, streaming over LCP-protected publication. That means you can stream an LCP-protected audiobook. That's the main use case, but potentially EPUB, potentially PDF. So streaming is now possible on both platforms. It was just available in Kotlin before. We've extended the support for accessibility metadata. We already had it, but we've aligned with the latest thing that were added to the EPUB specs. And we also have a built-in support for the display guide. So working with accessibility metadata can be complex, and making easy for everyone to understand what those accessibility metadata means is not always the easiest thing. So we're making the life of implementers easier by having that in there. Q3, we want to work, so this summer, we want to work on a brand new EDRLab API. So we've participated to the work organized by Daisy and Dedicon on requirements for reading systems, which brings a number of new ideas that are very interesting for Read Aloud. So we really want to push the envelope. We think we're going to introduce new features that we haven't seen before in other reading apps there. And also new EPUB navigators in Kotlin coming up at the same time. And before the end of the year, we also want to push support for media overlays. So that's also important for accessibility. And as I've already mentioned in the previous presentation, we have a new enhanced support for PDS coming as well in Swift. So what's Readium Web? So Readium Web is pretty much the same thing that Readium Mobile, but for the web. So it has been used in production since 2023, but it's still in an early adopter phase if we compare it to mobile. So mobile, hundreds of apps. Here it's a bit smaller. But that said, we have a lot of interest right now about using Readium Web. For example, we've already seen an implementation from the New York University Press. They've started working on this last September, I think, and now they have a V1 ready for a few of their books. We have Nora in the room, who's also looking into using it for web reader. And the Internet Archive has already deployed also a first prototype that lives side by side with their IIIF implementation. So that's just a few names, but we think there's going to be a lot more. But yeah, we're still at the beginning, I would say, of a wider implementation. But what's important here is that we're really going for a different approach than mobile. Mobile, we only shipped toolkits. So as some of the people in the previous presentation said, you have to do a bit of extra work. We're taking a different approach with web. With web, we want to have full implementation, not just toolkits, because we think a lot of people will just take our vanilla implementation and deploy it. So we're really seeing a mix of those two. And we think this has helped a lot to drive the adoption here. Readium CLI, so that's a new utility. And it's something that's designed to do two things. So it's designed to live in an ingestion pipeline. So some of you might be ingesting thousands, if not millions, of EPUB. And usually you have EPUB check, and you have ACE. That's meant to live side by side with those two. But it's also meant to power a deployment of the web reader. So it has two roles. So it's a multi-command, multi-feature utility. And right now, so it supports two commands. So manifest allows you to extract and infer metadata. So that's very useful, for example, if you want to assess the situation of your backlist. There could be a lot of accessibility metadata that you don't have in your database, but it lives in your EPUB. So you can use it for that. And the other one, serve, is also useful for Readium and Thorium Web. We're also considering two things in the future, three things actually. Generating samples, optimizing files, and also converting back and forth between EPUB and web publication. So more on that next year.
So hi everyone, I'm Jiminy Panoz and I'm the lead developer of Readium CSS. This is the last utility we will discuss today, and then we will switch to Thorium and the apps. So Readium CSS has a new version 2, which is a major version with a lot of breakage, because it has a different philosophy. When I came back, we had to update Readium CSS after 4 years. There were features that were implemented in Thorium Desktop for CGK, like letter spacing for Japanese, for example, but also hiding Ruby annotations. So we had to port that back into Readium CSS so that everyone could benefit. And it became clear that we had a lot of restrictions and side effects in Readium CSS that were not pleasing implementers. For example, you had responsive, which didn't play nicely with all the new device factors like foldables and so on and so forth. So that was removed. And we made Readium CSS just a pure library of styles that implementer can use as they wish. So now in version 2, when they apply something, it will be applied by Readium CSS without any filtering or nothing. That also applies to publisher styles. Before we had a safeguard to limit a subset of styles that you could put between such a flag. Typically a toggle with publisher styles. Now implementers can put everything they want into this toggle. It comes also with improved models. So font size has been a long standing and painful module that we had to deal with. We have a new implementation because it was rewritten from scratch. We are using Zoom right now and not some kind of voodoo magic between the scenes to handle everything. So it should work consistently with what browsers are providing because it's a standard CSS property now. It's been part of interop since 2024. And we're really happy with that because we have this implemented in Thorium Web, as I will present you later. And yeah, we also added support for variable fonts. Maybe you can think of the font weight user setting, which allows you to change the weight of a font on the Kindle or some other apps did in the past. It is now a proper citizen in Readium CSS, and you can use it directly from that. We also documented variable fonts with all the variants they are supporting, so that you can start with confidence implementing such a feature. So let's talk about Thorium. I'm also the lead developer of Thorium Web. I will talk about that, and then Hadrien and Daniel will talk about mobile and desktop. So Thorium Web, we had a vision of providing a highly customizable and accessible web reader. The idea is that you don't need to maintain a heavily modified fork of Thorium Web for your own apps. You can set everything in preferences, and Thorium Web will be built depending on these preferences. And of course, the idea is that we take care of accessibility, responsive, and cross-platform support. So it's built on top of Readium CSS and TypeScript toolkit, actually Readium Web, because we are also using the Go toolkit in the deployed version. So of course, that helps us dogfood our own code, debug and fix issue and improve things tremendously. Your use cases and feature requests are also highly welcome because we can't have all use cases in mind when we are doing this on our side. And it can be used for more than just books/publication. You may think about audiobooks, but we are thinking about web documentation, scientific research, and remediation tools, notably accessible remediation tools. So right now, there are two options for developers: a Next.js application that is ready to use. You can fork it and deploy it as the Internet Archive did a couple of days ago. But we're also offering an NPM package that is providing a library of React components, hooks, and helpers. Those are the building blocks of the Next.js app. And we have decided to make a package out of that so that everyone can benefit. And if your needs are vastly superior to forking and customizing Thorium Web, you can import those modules and start building with them. So version 1 is expected in June, so the end of this month, or early next month. We will discuss the roadmap later, but I will just showcase what customization means in Thorium Web at the moment. So for example, in the top right corner, you can see actions. These are entirely customizable. You can pick the action you want. For example, by default, we have settings, table of contents, full screen, and an overflow menu in which you can put secondary actions like jump to position, for instance. And of course, everything is responsive, but the good news is that you can pick what goes into the overflow menu depending on the breakpoints and so on and so forth. So you can customize this entirely. In the future, of course, you will be able to add your label in the top left corner, for example, or a link to the library, a previous link to the library. You will be able to pick what goes into the running head. Here we have the title of the books, but you will be able to choose the title of the chapter and so on and so forth. Everything will be entirely customizable. That also means that responsive being one of the main major principles we have to follow, you can also pick the container of each action. So for example, here we are settings. On larger screens, you can have a popover so that it's easier to see what modification you have applied to the text. But on smaller screens, on mobile, for example, and narrow screens, you can set it as a draggable bottom sheet. Choose the snap points, choose whether it should be the 8 of the content or the full 8 of the window, and so on and so forth. So the good news is that the settings are entirely customizable as well. You can pick what goes into there. You can pick the order. All the themes you are seeing, they are handled dynamically. So you can set colors and so on and so forth in preferences. And we will handle everything from that and create this component that allows you to change the themes. We have an auto theme as well that this maps to the operating system dark and light modes if you want to use that. But you can also pick all the ranges for the font size and the steps for the increments. You can also pick the values for the line 8 and so on and so forth. It's entirely customizable, and in the future, you'll probably be able to have different preferences for different languages as well. You can also dock this action or make these actions dockable. We took inspiration from Thorium Desktop on this. So here, for example, we have the table of content that we can dock to the left or to the right. And maybe you can start imagining what use cases will be possible with Thorium Web, because in this case, with the scroll mode for contents and the affordances at the bottom of the contents and the searchable talk on the left, you can probably think that we are not far from something like Gitbook and online documentation. So of course, in the future, we could have panels with images, a list of images or tables, and that may help you consider what a remediation tool can look like using Thorium Web. And once again, all from a set of preferences. So the roadmap, we want internationalization in version 1 because it's important. We have a lot of interest from different parties that are scattered throughout the world. We want some more customization, nothing major, but we want to have the final touches and some improvements, some minor improvements to the React components as well. Q3 will be all read aloud as Readium Mobile. That means Readium speech as well. We will take a look at audiobooks as well and have a proper progression slider at the bottom of the interface. And in Q4, we will focus on readability. So those are new tools tied to accessibility. You can think of it as custom presets to make the contents more readable in scroll mode, for example. You can also think about a reading rule and so on and so forth. And we will focus on history, so when you navigate throughout the publication, means to navigate back and so on and so forth. And we will have to develop that based on your feedback as well. So we warmly welcome any use case and feature request as regards Thorium Web. And I guess it's time to switch to Thorium Mobile.
So yeah, as you can hear based on Jiminy's presentation, so Thorium Web is kind of new, but we have another product that's even more new, like really, really, really new, and that's Thorium Mobile. So we know a bunch of you have been asking us to work on that for some of you years now. So the good news is it's coming, and we have a very specific vision for Thorium Mobile. So the first one that we always put on the top is the idea of bridging the gap between natively accessible and adapted content. So what we see is that we have very different formats, very different reading apps, different protocols in the adapted world compared to the EPUB world. EPUB versus DAISY, DODP versus OPDS, and we kind of want to bridge that gap. So what we want to do is create an app that can do both, like a place where I can get books from my specialized library, but also from my public library or anything else. So that means also built-in support for all libraries, public, specialized, school, anything. And we want to have a reference implementation in Readium Mobile. So we cannot really work on Readium Mobile without having a good reference implementation. We need to be the canary in the coal mine. When we do new features, we need to put it into users' hand, learn from it, and improve. So it's also useful for that. In 2025, we're really focusing only on iOS for now because we have to pick our battles. And we'll have a private beta end of summer, so in September. So anyone in this room, if you're an EDRLab member, reach out, we'll add you, we'll invite you, and you'll be able to test it. So don't hesitate to bother me during coffee and lunch break, or send me an email. We'll have a public beta in late Q4. So the idea is some of the organization here could invite users to test things out, get more feedback, see if it works for them. And ideally, we're targeting a release beginning or first quarter of next year. I haven't included that in the presentation, but this is a completely native app. It's not React, it's a native app using Swift UI. So we're really sticking to the latest and greatest API that Apple is developing with that. And I have a very early demo available, so I'll bring my iPad with me if you also want to bother me and see the demo. But I'll just show you a quick few screens before I finish on my side. So just to give you an idea, that's the bookshelf. So nothing fancy, a bookshelf covers some information. But what's interesting is on any of those books, so for example, the second one is an EPUB. But if I long press it, I'll be able to, or like left click or whatever, you'll be able to read or listen to this EPUB. So that's something we're pushing for. We're separating the modality from the format. So I should be able to read or listen to a book, but I should be able to listen and read potentially to an audiobook. So we're trying to push towards that really multimodal experience with this. And so for now, it's pretty basic. I can read it, but at any time, I can switch and listen to it. And I'll keep my place in the book. And maybe I'm tired at the end of the day, I want to listen, and you can move back and forth as you want, and also remember what you're doing. So if there's one book you listen to, another one that you read, even though they're both EPUB, it'll remember that. So that's a very, very early look. I'll be happy to show you more if you want to check out with it. And yeah, I'll pass the baton to Daniel to continue and talk about Thorium Desktop now.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Daniel Weck. I'm a software engineer. I work with EDRLab and the DAISY Consortium. So without further ado, because we don't have much time, Software engineering is fundamentally an iterative process. So let's travel back in time to a year ago, in June 2024, when we released Thorium 3.0, followed by 3.1 in February 2025, and 3.2 is about to be released. We're nearly ready to cut the release now, and we'll look at what's on the roadmap for future releases as well. Now, note that these are major milestones on our release timeline, but automated builds of Thorium Desktop are available frequently, pretty much instantly. We have a continuous delivery system for the application. So starting with Thorium 3.0, we introduced a major user interface refresh, a redesign. Now, this solved a number of usability and accessibility problems, but let's be honest, it also introduced new challenges that, in subsequent releases we had to address, and I'll come back to that. The changelog is quite big for this release, but I just wanted to single out two particular aspects. Secondly, we introduced an annotation feature. Now, at this stage, in 3.0, there was no data import or export, so it was quite limited in its usefulness. Also, our original bookmarking functionality was, remained a separate user experience, whereas, as you'll see, we've sort of harmonized that in later versions. So with Thorium 3.1, we needed to fix the user interface that we introduced in 3.0 with better keyboard navigation. We have a very strong focus on accessibility, so our support for screen readers, assistive technology, is very important to us, and so we improved focus handling, keyboard focus handling for screen readers. With regards to annotations, we now have data import and export, and we are proposing updates to the W3C standard as we're implementing it. We also make sure to generate multiple document selectors. So as you know, an annotation consists of selecting text in the document, and there are many different ways of serializing that information so as to maximize compatibility with other reading systems. And thirdly, we integrate Readium speech, which was presented earlier on. Essentially, this improves the ergonomics of selecting synthetic voices for text-to-speech read aloud in Thorium, and I'll show you in a minute. So 3.2, we're about ready to ship now. Again, in the user interface, we now have, amongst other things, the customizable keyboard shortcuts are now translated. They have a label and a description, which means that they are now searchable. The user can search for particular keyboard shortcuts and in order to edit them or just to discover them. Also, we have a duplication detection feature, and I'll show you an example of that. Regarding annotations, we now have feature parity between the new annotation feature and the old bookmarking feature. In that, for example, bookmarks can also have text notes with markdown syntax for basic formatting like bold and bullet lists. Bookmarks can also have user tags, user-entered tags. We support data import and export for bookmarking as well. And we have a custom HTML export, which we can talk about later if we have time. Essentially, also, we have an update of the rendering engine. So, as you can expect, annotations are rendered inline in the text visually. We have inline highlights. We will also have support for margin decorators. We have a system to preview the notes as well using a mouse hover floating text callout, and I'll do a demo of that in a minute. Still in 3.2, we have an update in text-to-speech. We now have new highlighting color presets and styles, for example, a horizontal ruler and a way to mask the text outside of the spoken utterance by fading out the text. Again, I'll show you that later. We also have now an alternative to pre-recorded synchronized text and audio. So you may know EPUB3 media overlays. Some of you, I'm sure, in the audience know about DAISY, digital talking books. So now our users, Thorium users, can choose to listen to these books using text-to-speech instead of the pre-recorded voice. And finally, we introduce support for print. It's currently for PDF documents only, and I will show you how it works later. All right, so let's switch over to a live demo. Pray for me. It's loading. I do have, there we go. So that's Thorium, full screen, library. Let's open that book for now. Okay, so the resolution is different than on my screen earlier on, but that doesn't matter. So here we have a bunch of annotations displayed in the text. As you can see here, I'm mouse hovering on top of that particular word. You can see that there's a text node pops up. That's what I entered earlier on. You can see that we have support for emojis, and there's some markdown syntax in here. In fact, if I click on the annotated text, you can see that there's some bold text in here. The list of annotations here is fully accessible and paginated so that it's easy to find your way in. We can push these annotations into the margin so that they don't interfere with the reading experience. I can still hover on top of the margin decorators, and it will show where the annotation actually is in the document and what its text note is. Also note the bookmarks. They use the typical ribbon metaphor in the margin. Let's have a quick look at the TTS, text-to-speech. So here we have the preview panel for the style that I want to use for playback. Here we have the line ruler or horizontal ruler, which fades out the text outside of the utterance, and we highlight individual words within the utterance as well to track speech. But a more traditional way of rendering this is, sentence in using a background color and word using underline, let's say. But all of this can be configured in Thorium through this interface. Let's run a demo quickly. There you go. So there's no audio because I'm muted, but you can see the gist of it here. All right, and finally, for this short demo, up here, I'm going to close this. Up here, you can see that well, some of you may have noticed this is French. The text is in French, so automatically we switch over to a French voice, but we have a choice of French from France and French from Canada. So these are the synthetic speech voices available on Mac. I'm running Mac right now. And so the user is able to set his or her preferences per language. So if a book contains multiple languages, I can pick and choose my favorite voices for that, for the playback. Okay, so switching over to the presentation now. So this was a fallback just in case the demo crashed, but it's worked. So I'm going to quickly skim over this. So that's another style which I didn't show, outline and solid background for the word. We've looked at this one, we've looked at this one. All right, so the next screenshot is about annotations. So here is the edit interface for when I want to create an annotation. So I select the text in the document, I'm presented with a text editor where I can add my own note, choose the color, choose the highlighting style, and add a tag. So in this case, note how I've added the tag opinions, because the way I like to work with my books is organize my annotations using tags. And here is the result that we saw earlier on with the mouse hover text. So here I'm creating a bookmark, and note at the bottom that I'm reusing the tag that I've already created. I labeled the tag opinions. I'm choosing green color, and I'm adding a note for this bookmark. As I said earlier on, we're harmonizing the bookmarking and annotation system so as to create a unified user experience. So bookmarks can now have notes as well. And here we have an example of mouse hover on top of the ribbon icon in the margin, and as you can see, my text note pops up, or a preview of the note is popping up here. We looked at that earlier on, margin decorators as well as inline rendering of the notes. This is the list of annotations that we saw earlier on. In this list of annotation, if I have many of them, I can filter them by tag, by color, by highlighting style. So if I only want to see the annotations that I underlined or that I stroke through, indicating an error or something to be removed. And moving on swiftly to the keyboard shortcut editor, but for this I'm going to move back to the live demo. So if I go to the settings in Thorium, the keyboard shortcuts editor is here. And if I mouse hover on top of, sorry, there it is, on top of the information icon, you can see that every single keyboard shortcut has a label and a description, so that's really helpful if I want to figure out what a keyboard shortcut does. There are, I think, 50 of them, so quite a long list. So if I now filter them out by keyword, let's say create, you can see there are 3 of them that match. And we search both the description and the label of the keyboard shortcut. And now, to finish this demo, if I select the same keyboard shortcut twice, it'll be displayed as an error. So this is a duplicate that has been detected, and I'm being warned about it by Thorium to avoid conflicts. And finally, PDF print. So this is a very large PDF with over 5,000 pages. And in Thorium, we implement a pre-print dialog. And I will show you the utility of it in the next slide. So this is a LCP-protected publication, which has a limitation in that only 10 pages can be printed out of this book. And so here in Thorium, I'm selecting page number 10, followed by a range of pages from 14 to 18, that's another 4. And also, I'm selecting page 260 all the way to the end. It's an open-ended range, and this book has 266 pages. So if you're good at maths, you know that I've selected more than 10 pages here. But Thorium follows the LCP specification and limits the number of pages to 10. If I press print here, it sends the print job to the system dialog, which then sends it to real printer. If I want to print again, I'm allowed to print these pages however many times I want. It's just that I can't print new pages from the book. All right, so looking into the future now, Thorium 3.3, for example, maybe 4.0, who knows. Annotations, we really would like to introduce support for PDF files. At the moment, it's limited to EPUB format. And the other way around, print is currently limited to PDF, but we would really like to implement support for reflowable EPUBs as well. Thirdly, we're looking into ways to customize Thorium Reader. It's early stage, we're gathering use cases, and you're very welcome to participate, of course. But essentially, software forks of Thorium, and there are many of them, are expensive to maintain. So instead, a standard Thorium Reader distribution could be modified via post-build plugins. This would allow vendors to apply their own branding, to activate or deactivate features, to integrate a default publication catalog, online feeds, etc. At the moment, it's an open-ended discussion, so you're very welcome to join. And finally, this is my last slide. What about AI-generated image descriptions? It's currently a work-in-progress experiment, and I'll talk more about it later today at 1 p.m. after lunch. But essentially, in a nutshell, this articulates around 3 main themes. We need a dedicated user interface to, 1, see the existing authored short and extended descriptions, if any. 2, to chat with AI models using default or custom prompts to dynamically obtain descriptions and contextual information that the book doesn't provide already. And thirdly, to hyperlink into external web resources for further analysis and research. But like I said, this is a teaser. Come back this afternoon and you'll learn more about this. All right, thank you.